I look very boyish today. And I've got an earphone in my ear because I don't know, a can. Hello, my name is Daniel Wright. If you are new here, welcome to my channel. Every single Friday, I post a video on how to houseplant. And it's just a series where I pick a houseplant and I pretty much tell you everything that I can dig up and find on that plant. And you just, we just casually chat about it. And I don't want this to be scripted, and I'm not trying to bullshit you, and I don't want you to bullshit me. So how about we just all sit down and chill out and relax and have a good time? And I don't know what I'm saying right now. We're on episode 3 now, so I'm just going to go ahead and jump in because I highly recommend you going back and starting at episode 1. So today's sponsor is Plants Across America. When I started this series like 2 weeks ago, we were, I think, at 3,200 members, and now we're at 4,200 members. I would like to think that maybe I had a part in that, but I'm not 100% sure, what is real, actually. Today's video is going to be Monstera deliciosa. Anyways, that category does include Thai constellation, which I have one actually to show you in just a few minutes, as you can see from the thumbnail. I also have a regular one, which I have cleaned up. And I filmed that whole process of propagating the babies, cutting it, cleaning it up, and putting it on a pole for it to climb up. I just haven't edited that video yet because I've been very busy, but it's going to be pretty awesome. Maybe. We are not going to cover the Monstera albo or alba borzigiana because that's a completely different species. I plan on doing a separate video, number 1, on how to tell the difference between deliciosa and borzigiana, number 2, going over the specific details in the pictures because it's just one of the most beautiful plants ever, and I don't have one and I want one. So if you would like to donate to the I Need an Albo Borzigiana Fund. Anyways, before we get into the overview of the plant, in which I will show you this up close in detail and the Thai constellation up close in detail, I'm going to give you the origin story, which is actually one of my favorite parts of this series. So Monstera was first discovered in 1963 by someone called Charles Plumer, I don't know. And that name should actually sound familiar to you because they actually discovered the pink princess philodendron, which is last week's video. I highly recommend that you go watch that if you have not. All right, so last week we talked about how Charles Plumer went over to the St. Thomas Islands and he brought over a collection of 6 different philodendron. They weren't called philodendron at the time. That's if you want the details, watch last week's video. But one of the plants that he brought back was the pink princess philodendron, which is what we talked about in last week's video. He did not bring over a Monstera deliciosa. However, during his travels, he kept a diary. And I found the transcript of this diary in all of the illustrations of the plants that he found in it. In this, I think it was, I found it on page, this is dedication. I went through multiple hundreds of pages in a language that was not mine so that I could see this picture that he drew of the Monstera deliciosa plant for the first time ever. And it fascinated me so much. So I'm going to put a link down below for you to be able to find this transcript of his diary so that you can look at the different drawings, because there is more than one. I think there was Monstera ansonii, there was deliciosa clearly. I think that there was some calatheas in there, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a couple of days since I've done all of my research before I filmed this, but definitely check that link out also, because I think it's really cool. Anyways, you've got the origin story. Now let's move on to the overview of the plant. I'm actually going to move this one into the foreground right here so that you can see that, and then I'm going to show you the leaves in all of the details of the plant itself. Hello? Okay, this is as close as I can get it to the camera, which actually doesn't look bad at all. So For the very few of you that have not seen a Monstera deliciosa, the front of the leaves, which is dirty and which I need to clean off, once they reach semi-maturity, this is semi-maturity, they get fenestrations, which are the holes and splits in the leaves, which we're actually going to talk about soon. We're going to talk about that in a few minutes when I get to the interesting facts about this plant, which is really cool. But the front, you generally have one central vein going down the leaf. You have splits off in a vein going down each side in between the fenestrations for support. And then this, essentially, I have this, I cannot move this up. It kind of looks like crap at the moment, but I have this pretty much tied here since I had just basically chopped this guy up and cleaned him up. And he's already almost completely adhering to the pole himself, so I can actually take those off. The back of the leaves are actually pretty basic. You just see a little bit more of the veining and detail, but a regular Monstera deliciosa pretty much is uniform throughout. But I also want to show you one of the babies that I propagated off of him when I cleaned him. I actually have him rooting up in some water. I'm not going to show you the crystal clean water. When the leaves first start out, they're basically just going to have a typical heart shape for you to, and they're not going to have any fenestrations. That's what the little bitty baby leaves get. Then from that point on, it's going to slowly start getting fenestrations like this. You're not going to have complete holes that stretch out to the very end of the leaf for full fenestrations, but you're just going to have little holes starting out. And then that's going to slowly continue progressing until you have full plants like that can start trailing. Now, one of the things that I do want to show you that's probably still considered a baby Monstera deliciosa when you think about how big these get, because these leaves can get up to 6-7 feet long in the tropics, and they can have several layers of fenestration. Okay, so now I want to talk to you about a couple things that I've learned while doing my research. Some of this stuff I already knew, so it's nothing new to me, but it may be new to you. But there is something that I didn't know, and you probably don't know. If you do, kudos to you. You have thoroughly done your research. All right, so I'm getting tired, you guys. So a Monstera deliciosa has muscles. I mean, technically they're not muscles, but kind of. All right, so this plant is so smart that it has something called a geniculum that is on every single petiole right before it hits the leaf. On the adaxial side of the leaf, by the petiole, it has a squiggle, I guess is the best way that I can kind of tell you guys what it is. But what that does, it allows the Monstera to have a fulcrum, which is just essentially a point of attachment that gives you a little bit more control over an object or a bending point. So that way the Monstera can tilt and bend and adjust its leaves to get maximum sunlight so that it can have maximum food. So really, when you look at a Monstera, whether it be in the stores or another picture, you're gonna see kind of a general pattern there to where the Monstera at the bottom, it's slits in its leaves. I do not like that word. But those sections and on the leaves, they kind of bend and twist a little bit, and they kind of tilt upward sometimes. That's because it's doing that to try to get a hold of more sunlight. And then when it slowly attaches to a pole, they will bend their leaves down flat like this, which is one of the very aesthetically pleasing ways people like to grow them. However, once their leaves get mature, and I'm going to show you if I can find a picture. Once the leaves get more mature, then it really uses that feature that it has to bend the leaves back up as flat as they can possibly get it, and that's going to allow them to hit indirect light and get the most of it. And some of the research, you guys probably already know this, but most of the time the leaves get so big that this plant is just genetically altered to have holes in the leaves because it's in the tropics. Okay, so the boring part of the taxonomy, which is something that none of us really want to look at, slides in over here. Special effect. Oh, wow, that's so cool, Daniel. But now let's get to the cool part where we have forms, varieties, hybrids. This section could be called a lot of other things. Also, there's probably going to be some forms that I don't mention in here, specifically because it's very difficult to get correct information from websites that may or may not be credible. If you go down 3 or 4 pages of the Google list, there are going to be people who have theories of, well, I don't think Borsigiana exists. I think it's all Deliciosa. I don't think that, it's a lot. It's a lot, and we're not going to have it on this channel. I'm just going to tell you what I found. Okay, so clearly there's the regular form of Monstera deliciosa, which is what we are talking about here. So another form is going to be the Monstera Thai constellation, and I'm actually going to go get that for you right now. Okay, so this is going to be difficult for me to hold. I've got to hold it straight up because it's in LECA, and it's all tilted one direction because I've got it in a very controlled environment with grow lights and humidifiers, and it's probably going to take up my face, but look at that. Look at this. So this is what a Thai constellation. Most of you already know what this is. Ooh, most of you guys are actually probably saying, duh, Daniel, you're being stupid. But I wanted to give you guys a close-up so that you can see in detail that a Monstera Thai constellation doesn't necessarily have sectoral variegation, although it can. But the smaller forms tend to have a little bit more speckled variegation. And every once in a while in the smaller versions and with the little baby ones, you'll get a good, nice patch like that. I think I've actually got another patch right here that's just kind of over the leaf. But generally, the entire plant is going to have this speckled cream variegation. This is not bright white. One of the things that I want to point out, and I will go into detail in my next video on this, but it's important to note that the variegation on this plant is considered stable, which means that you don't have to worry about this reverting, and it's just going to grow that way no matter what type of lighting condition that you put it in. Although I really think that you should put it in a lighting condition that is very suitable for it and helps it grow. But generally, this isn't going to revert. You're not going to have to worry about chopping it. I plan on doing an entire video on conserving variegation because that alone is terrifying. But since we're focusing on Deliciosa here, I just wanted to show you, and actually I'm very excited to point out that he is getting a new leaf that's about to start unfurling right here. But yes, this is my beautiful baby. And ooh, look at that though. So glad I got a new camera. Look at this beautiful baby in detail. I love that variegation. It is perfect. I've got to stop trying to plant flex. I'm really not trying to do that. I hate it when people constantly put stuff up and like gloat to other people and say, look what I got, look what I've got. I definitely don't want to ever do that on this channel, and I don't ever want you to think that I have tons of money to spend on plants. I buy and sell a lot, and that's how I have what I have. So I just figured I would go ahead and let that be known, since I'm getting to the point in my series where I'm talking about plants that I have, because I'm going to show you instead of just bring up a random picture. I had to do a lot of digging in order to convince myself that this was valid. So if this is not valid, please let me know in the comments below. If you want to correct me, just do it in a nice way. I don't mind at all. There is a form of Monstera that's considered a true form of variegated Monstera, and that is called the Monstera deliciosa aurea variegata. These plants, they don't have cream, they don't have white, they have a bright yellow color of variegation. And sometimes, depending on either the cultivar or the conditions that it's grown in, sometimes it can kind of come up and look lime green. I've seen a lot of plants in the wild. Well, I personally haven't seen them. I've seen pictures of plants in the wild where the variegation is a very, very, very yellow color. And then I've seen them in grown in the home where they're kind of green. And I kind of have a theory about that. I'm thinking in my mind that the Monstera aurea tends to lean a little bit more towards lime green, and that's why it shows up in houseplant versions that way, because we like to keep our plants perfect. Out in the wild, that's really unrealistic, and you're not going to really find a plant that's perfect. It's going to have brown leaves, it's going to have some burnt spots, nothing's going to be perfect. So what I'm thinking in my mind is when a true form of variegated Monstera is out in the wild, that the variegation portion tends to get a little bit more chlorotic because of the environment that it's in, the amount of light that it's getting. Sometimes it might not just be able to take it, and that's probably why it's bright yellow in the wild. And then I've seen so many people complain or just talk about how it's lime green and it's not really what they thought it was going to be. Now I'm going to go over care tips very quickly because it's basically, at this point, we're in episode 3 of the series. It's very similar. A standard aroid care, humidity, you really like it to be between 50 to 80%. Monsteras are pretty much a little bit more resilient. You can go a little bit lower than 50. I pretty much keep all of my plants in a room with 70% humidity. So I clearly don't recommend going below 50% on anything that you bring in if you want it to do well. Just like the other plants, bright, indirect light. This plant wants as much light as possible without getting completely direct sunlight, because since they're epiphytic, they grow up tree trunks and get massive, but they're underneath the canopy still. They're not completely taking over. They're just under the branches of the trees so they can get filtered light. As far as watering goes, this plant's actually very, very tolerant of being underwatered. It's very humid in the tropics, so it can pull moisture pretty easily from the air. It has aerial roots everywhere once it starts growing, so you're not really gonna have to worry about getting a ton of water when you're in a high humidity environment like that. The type of soil that I recommend is actually my aroid mix, which I will have comments and links in the description box below of everything that I put in my aroid mix if you would like to buy any of those. All right, last but not least, propagation. This is actually very simple. It's the same process. However, when you propagate a Monstera deliciosa, you have to cut in the internodal spacing. One of the problems with that is it's going to be really easy to do it for a regular deliciosa because you just got to snip and the internodal spacing is really long. The Thai constellation that I just showed you, the nodes are basically right on top of each other and there's not really any room for error, so you want to be extremely careful when you're doing that. One of the best ways to propagate is in water, so I'm going to go back to the small cutting that I showed you. So I just have this guy growing in a drinking glass. I never claimed to be super fancy when it comes to water propagating, but you really don't have to be. If you want to propagate something in a drinking glass, propagate it in a drinking glass. Who cares? I have so many plants propagating right now, I ran out of containers and I'm almost out of drinking glasses. But I wanted to show you this for a specific reason. So I put this in water a couple hours after I propagated it, and there is a reason for that. Again, I've got a video coming out on this whole thing, but this actually came off of that plant. So what I did was I chopped him. I put cinnamon on the end because cinnamon is antifungal, which means you don't have to worry about a fungus developing over that or it increasing the chances of getting rot. Then I let it set out for a couple of hours so that it could kind of callus off. Because if you stick it immediately in water, the chance of it rotting is extremely high. Monstera is pretty much prone to rotting in pure water anyway, so you just have to be careful with that. But I wanted to show you this because you'll see very quickly this. Actually, I want to get closer to show you this because this is kind of important. So on the very bottom here where you can see the brown, there was already a nub for an aerial root there. Okay. Now, there is another section up here, if I can keep my camera focusing on it. This other aerial root that is growing right there, it did not have a nub or anything there. So you don't have to have an aerial root nub there, you just have to know where the node is. So in that case, it is in between where it splits. So I just want to make that clear because I've actually gotten that question a lot. This came out of a node and there wasn't any type of rooting there at all. It sprouted it all on its own. And then of course, since this one already had a node, it started. So I just wanted to show you guys that and make that clear. So that way, whenever you are propagating, you can kind of be aware and be at ease a little bit, because even if you don't see an aerial root, there still may be a node. Anyways, guys, that's all I have for today. Thank you for watching this video. I very much appreciate it. If you have any suggestions on what type of plant you want to see for next week's video, be sure to put that in the comments down below. And don't forget to go join Plants Across America, and just make sure whenever you do, post a comment or post something and say hi to me to let me know that you came over from this channel. Anyways, I love you guys so much. I'm excited already for next week's video, and I will see you guys later. Bye.